I thought I knew my granddaughter. I thought I understood her silence. I was wrong about almost everything. Her name is Chloe. She just turned 9 years old last March, and she has these serious brown eyes that always look like they were calculating something, weighing something, even when she was sitting perfectly still at the kitchen table eating cereal. I used to think that was just her personality. Quiet kid, observant, maybe a little shy. I didn't know she was carrying something I never should have let a child carry alone. My name is not important to this story. What matters is that I'm 64 years old. I worked 31 years as a civil engineer for the county, and I retired with a pension, a paid-off house in Spokane, and what I thought was a decent relationship with my son. I'm a widower. My wife, Carol, passed 6 years ago from pancreatic cancer. It was fast. 3 months from diagnosis to the end. After that, the house felt enormous, and I felt very small inside it. My son's name is Victor. He's 41. He married a woman named Faye about 12 years ago, and they have 2 kids, Chloe and her older brother, Marcus. Her brother. His name doesn't matter to this story either. What matters is Chloe. I want to be honest about something before I go further. Victor and I were never as close as I wanted us to be. After Carol died, I thought we might grow closer. Grief can do that sometimes, pull people together. But with Victor, it went the other direction. He called less, visited less. When they did come for the holidays, Faye ran most of the conversation, and Victor sat at the table looking like a man who had somewhere else he'd rather be. I told myself it was just adult life. People get busy. Kids, jobs, mortgages. I tried not to read too much into it. Chloe was the reason I kept showing up. From the time she was about 5 years old, that little girl had a way of sitting next to me on the porch without saying much, and somehow making me feel less alone than I'd felt in years. She'd pick up whatever I was doing, sorting through old fishing lures, reading the newspaper, and just quietly participate. No drama, no performance, just presence. Carol would have loved her something fierce. But around the time Chloe turned 7, something shifted. She stopped meeting my eyes when I visited. She'd come sit near me like always, but there was a distance in her that hadn't been there before. If I asked her a direct question, "How's school? You still like your teacher?" she'd give me the shortest possible answer and then look away. Sometimes she'd glance at Faye across the room, quick and nervous, before she answered. I noticed it. But I told myself kids go through phases. I didn't want to make a thing of it. Victor called me on a Tuesday evening in October, 2 years ago. He sounded tired in a way that I'd learned not to question. He said Faye's sister was having some kind of medical situation down in Phoenix, and Faye needed to go help. He asked if Chloe could stay with me for a week, maybe 10 days. Her brother was at a school outdoor camp that same week, so it was just going to be Chloe. He said it like it was logistics, like he was arranging to store a piece of furniture. I said, of course. I said I'd be glad to have her. He dropped her off that Saturday with a duffel bag, a backpack, and exactly 4 sentences of conversation. Before he was back in the car and gone, Chloe stood on my porch holding the strap of her backpack and watched his taillights disappear down the street. She didn't wave. I held the front door open and said, "Well, looks like it's just you and me, kiddo." She looked up at me, those serious eyes. Then she nodded and walked inside. The first couple of days were easy and quiet. I took her to school in the mornings, picked her up in the afternoons, made dinner. She did her homework at the kitchen table. We watched Jeopardy after dinner, which she was surprisingly good at for a 9-year-old. She ate well. She slept fine, but she still had that quality of careful distance, like she was measuring how much of herself to give me. I didn't push. I figured she'd open up when she was ready. On the 3rd evening, I was going through some mail at the kitchen table after dinner. Chloe was sitting across from me, supposedly reading. But I could tell she wasn't turning pages. She was watching me. I'd pick up an envelope, she'd watch. I'd set it down, she'd watch. It was starting to feel less like a kid being curious and more like a kid waiting for something. I looked up and said, "Everything okay?" She nodded. Went back to pretending to read. I went back to the mail. There was a thick envelope from a financial services company I didn't immediately recognize. I opened it and started reading. It was a summary of account activity, a joint account I didn't remember opening. My name was on it, so was Victor's, and the balance was not what I expected. It showed a series of transfers going back 11 months, regular, steady amounts. Not enormous individually, but added together. I did the math on the back of the envelope. It came to somewhere around $40,000. I sat very still. I have a regular account at my local credit union that my pension goes into. I have a separate savings account that I've been adding to for decades, which I've always planned to split between Victor and his brother, my other son who lives in Portland, as part of my estate. Victor knew about that account. We talked about it once after Carol died when I was updating my will. I did not remember agreeing to a joint account with any financial services company. I did not remember signing anything. My hands were steady, but my mind was not. I set the envelope face down on the table. I looked up. Chloe was still watching me. "Grandpa," she said. Just that word. Like she'd been holding it in her mouth for days and finally let it go. I looked at her. "Yeah, sweetheart." She closed her book very carefully, like it mattered how she did it. She set it flat on the table. Then she folded her hands on top of it, and she looked at me with those eyes. Those eyes that I suddenly understood were not calculating, not shy, not a personality trait. They were watchful. They had been watchful for a long time because she had needed them to be. "I know about the papers," she said. "I didn't say anything. I just waited." "I wasn't supposed to hear," she said. "Mom and Dad didn't know I was in the hallway. I was getting a glass of water and I heard them in the office and the door wasn't all the way closed." She paused, swallowed. "Dad said your name." And then he said something about accounts. "And moving money before you notice. And Mom said they needed to do the other ones before something happened to you." She stopped. She was gripping her own hands on the book. I said very carefully, "How long ago was this?" "Last spring," she said. "Before school got out. Almost 5 months ago." She had been carrying this for 5 months. "Did you ever try to tell someone?" I asked. Something moved across her face, something that looked a lot like shame, which broke my heart because she had nothing to be ashamed of. "I tried to tell Dad's brother," she said. "Uncle Stephen, at the 4th of July. She looked down at her hands. I didn't say it right. I just said I heard something I wasn't supposed to, and it was about Grandpa's money. He asked me if I was sure about what I heard. I said I thought so. He said kids sometimes misunderstand adult conversations." She paused. "He said I should probably not repeat it." I kept my face neutral with great effort. "And you didn't tell me," I said. Not accusatory, just noting it. "Mom and Dad told me." She stopped. Started again. "A while back, Mom told me that if I ever told you things about their private conversations, you might get upset and not want to see us anymore. She said old people get confused sometimes and take things the wrong way." She looked up at me then, and her voice dropped to almost nothing. "I didn't want you to stop wanting to see me." I had to look at the window for a moment. When I looked back, I said, "Chloe, I want you to listen to me very carefully." I waited until I was sure she was. "Nothing you could ever tell me would make me stop wanting to see you. Do you understand that?" "Nothing." Her lower lip moved. She pressed it still. "I understand," she said. "Good," I said. "Now tell me everything you remember." She did. She sat at my kitchen table and told me, in the careful and precise way that serious children tell things, everything she had heard through that not quite closed office door. She told me about dates she'd overheard, about a name she didn't recognize, a company name she'd written down on the inside cover of a notebook because she'd had some instinct that she might need to remember it. She went and got the notebook from her backpack. The company name was written in her careful 9-year-old handwriting, slightly misspelled but close enough. It matched the name on the envelope sitting face down on my kitchen table. I will not describe what I felt in that moment in clinical terms, because clinical terms would not be honest. What I felt was grief and rage in approximately equal measure, and underneath both of them, Something I can only call a terrible clarity. The kind that comes when something you didn't want to be true turns out to be exactly that. I asked Chloe if she was hungry. She said a little. I made her toast with peanut butter and a glass of milk, and I sat with her while she ate it, and I kept my voice and my hands steady. I told her she had done the right thing telling me. I told her she was brave. I told her that I was going to take care of it and that she did not need to worry anymore. She ate her toast. She drank her milk. Then she said very quietly, "I tried not to tell you for a long time because I didn't think you'd believe me either." I believe that is the sentence that rearranged something permanent in my chest. "I believe you," I said. "I believe you the second you started talking." She nodded. She didn't cry, which I think took more strength than crying would have. "Okay," she said. "Good." After she went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time. Then I picked up the phone and called a man I've known for 30 years, a retired attorney named Frank Oglesby, who used to do work for the county. I told him I needed to talk to him first thing in the morning. He heard something in my voice and said he'd be there at 8. I didn't sleep much that night. I sat in the armchair in the living room, in the dark, in the quiet house, and I thought about $40,000 and 11 months of transfers and an office door that wasn't quite all the way closed. I thought about a 9-year-old girl who had been told, directly or indirectly, by the two people who were supposed to protect her most, that her instincts were wrong and her voice wasn't worth hearing. Frank arrived at 8:05. I showed him the envelope. I showed him Chloe's notebook. I walked him through everything she'd told me the night before. He was quiet for a long time after I finished. Then he put his reading glasses on the table and said, "Okay, first things first, do not touch that account. Don't transfer anything. Don't call the company yet. Second, you need to pull your full credit report today, all 3 bureaus. If there's one account you don't recognize, there may be others." There were others. The credit report I pulled that morning, sitting at Frank's kitchen table with a cup of coffee going cold beside me, showed 3 accounts opened in my name over the past 14 months. One was the joint account from the envelope. One was a home equity line of credit against my house, my paid-off house, with a credit limit of $90,000, of which $62,000 had already been drawn. The third was a personal loan in my name for $18,000, already fully dispersed. I am 64 years old. I have been careful with money my entire adult life. I have never carried a balance on a credit card for more than 30 days. I paid off my mortgage 11 years early. I built something not enormous, but solid, because I believed in leaving something for my family. I sat in Frank's kitchen and I did the arithmetic. The number was not abstract. It was specific, and it was large, and it had my name attached to it. Frank had already picked up his phone. He had a colleague, a woman who specialized in elder financial fraud and estate litigation, and he was calling her before I'd even finished reading the page. The next several weeks are a story in themselves. I won't walk through every step because some of it is still ongoing. What I will say is this. My son and his wife had, over the course of just over a year, used my identity in several forged documents, including what appeared to be my signature on account applications, to access and drain or leverage somewhere in the neighborhood of $120,000 of my net worth, between liquid transfers and the credit lines drawn against my home. How they got the documents they needed to do it is something I'll let the investigators describe. What I know is that Victor had accompanied me to an appointment at my bank about 18 months before all this at his suggestion to help me streamline some accounts after Carol's death. I had trusted him. I had been grateful he was offering to help. The home equity line of credit especially. That one kept me up at night. My house, Carol and I bought it in 1989. We refinished the floors ourselves, one room at a time, over 3 summers. She painted the kitchen cabinets white the year before she got sick. I had paid it off, and I was never going to borrow against it. I had been specific about that. It was the one thing I was absolutely certain I had never agreed to. My name was on the paperwork. My signature, or something that looked enough like it, was on the paperwork. By the time the attorney and investigators had enough to move forward, Victor knew something was happening. I had not called him. I had not confronted him. Frank had advised me strongly against it, and I had agreed, though it was one of the harder things I've done. Victor left me 2 voicemails during those weeks, casual in tone, asking how Chloe's visit was going. I did not return them. I texted once to say Chloe was fine and I'd be in touch soon. Chloe stayed with me for 3 weeks in the end, not 10 days. Victor called at one point and said Faye's situation in Phoenix was taking longer than expected, and could I keep her a bit longer? I said of course. I had the feeling he wasn't entirely unhappy to have her out of the house while whatever he thought was happening, or not happening, sorted itself out. Those 3 weeks with Chloe are something I will keep for the rest of my life. She helped me rake leaves in the backyard on a Saturday afternoon in late October, the 2 of us with big rakes going at the maple by the fence that drops an unreasonable amount of leaves every fall. She asked me once while we were working if I was still upset about what she told me. I said I was working through it. She nodded and kept raking. Then she said, "I should have told you sooner." I leaned on my rake and looked at her. "You told me when you could," I said. "That's all anyone can do." She thought about that. Then she went back to raking. We went to the Spokane pumpkin patch a week before Halloween because she mentioned she'd never actually been to one. We ate pie at the diner on 3rd Street because she said she'd heard kids at school talking about it. We watched old movies on weekend nights, wrapped in blankets on the couch. She picked The Princess Bride one week, and I picked Cool Hand Luke the next. And she said she didn't understand why I liked it, and I said she would when she was older, which satisfied neither of us, but made us both laugh. I drove her to school every morning. I picked her up every afternoon. Every single time she was the last one out of the building. Not because she was slow, I realized, but because she always waited to make sure I was actually there before she walked out the door. When the authorities moved forward, it happened quickly and in the early morning, the way these things do. Victor and Faye were arrested on a Wednesday. The charges included identity theft, elder financial fraud, forgery, and wire fraud. There were additional charges related to the forged loan applications that I'll let the legal process address in its own time. I was the one who had to call my other son in Portland to tell him what had happened. That was a hard phone call. He drove up that weekend. We sat at my kitchen table, him and me and Frank, and we talked for a long time. He kept saying he should have seen it. I told him there was nothing to see until there was. I believe that. I still believe it. The court appointed a temporary guardian for Chloe and her brother while the case moved forward, a family services arrangement. They were placed with Faye's parents down in Medford. I filed immediately for extended visitation rights, which Frank said was likely to be approved given the circumstances. We're still working through that process. Chloe called me on a Sunday afternoon about 3 weeks after she'd left my house. She'd gotten my number from her grandmother in Medford and asked to use the phone. The grandmother had the good sense and decency to hand it over without a lot of questions. "Hi, Grandpa," she said. "Hi, sweetheart," I said. "Are you okay?" It was such a direct question. No preamble, no small talk. Just the things she wanted to know. "I'm okay," I said. "I promise. Are you okay?" "I think so," she said. Then, after a pause, I told the lady who came to talk to us, the social worker. I told her what I told you. She said I did the right thing. "You did," I said. She asked me why I didn't tell someone sooner. Her voice was careful. I told her I tried once and it didn't work, and then I was scared. "That's an honest answer," I said. "That's exactly the right answer." There was a pause. I could hear background noise, a television somewhere, a door. "Grandpa," she said, "when can I come back and rake the rest of the leaves?" I laughed. I hadn't laughed in a while and it surprised me a little, the way it came out. "Whenever you want," I said. "Those leaves aren't going anywhere." "Okay," she said. "Good. I am still working through the financial piece. Some of the money may be recoverable and some of it may not be. Frank is optimistic about the house. He believes the equity line can be unwound given the evidence of fraud, which would mean my home stays free and clear. The liquid transfers are more complicated. I may get some of it back. I may not get all of it. I won't pretend that doesn't matter. It does matter. I worked for it. Carol and I worked for it together. 31 years of showing up, of doing the job right, of not spending what we didn't have. That money was the physical evidence of a life lived carefully. Having it taken by my own son, using my own name. I'd be lying if I said I'd made peace with that. I haven't. I'm not sure I'm supposed to, but here is what I know. A 9-year-old girl sat across a kitchen table from me and chose to trust me with something that had been pressing down on her for months. She had tried once before and been told she was wrong. She had been conditioned, carefully and deliberately, to doubt her own perception. And she had held on to the truth anyway, like a coal in her fist, waiting for a moment when she believed it might matter. I believed her the moment she started talking. I want to be clear about that, not because it makes me look good, but because I think it was the only thing I did in this whole situation that was actually right. I didn't figure it out. I didn't protect her the way a grandfather is supposed to. I let things drift for years without asking the questions I should have asked. But when she sat down across from me and told me what she knew, I believed her completely and immediately, and I think that matters. I think that was the thing she needed most and had not yet received from any adult in her life. If you take nothing else from this, when a child tells you something that doesn't make sense yet, that sounds too big, that you're tempted to file away under kids misunderstand things, stop, sit down, give them the full weight of your attention and your belief. They are usually telling you something real. They are almost always telling you something they have been trying very hard to say. Chloe is in Medford right now, in a school she didn't choose, in a house that isn't hers. She calls me on Sundays when she can. We talk about Jeopardy categories and the Leaf situation in my backyard and what movies she wants to watch when she visits. She has started to sound in the last few weeks a little more like a kid and a little less like someone braced for impact. That's something. That's a lot, actually. The maple tree in my backyard still has about a third of its leaves, even this late in the season. I've been leaving them on purpose. I told myself it was because the ground cover was good for the lawn over winter. That's partly true. Mostly I'm waiting for her to come help me finish the job. She will. I know she will. And when she does, we'll rake the rest of those leaves into the biggest pile we can manage, and she'll probably jump in it whether she thinks she's too old to or not, because she's 9 and the pile will be enormous and it will be impossible to resist. And I will stand there with my rake and I will watch her, and I will be here. That's the whole job now. Just being here and making sure she knows I'm not going anywhere. She watches from me every time she walks out a door. The least I can do is always be standing there when she does. I've had a lot of time to sit with this. More time than I wanted, honestly. There were nights in that first month, after the attorneys and the investigators and the phone calls, where I'd sit in the armchair Carol used to read in the dark, and I'd try to trace it back. Where did it start? What did I miss? What should I have seen? The honest answer is that I missed the signs because I didn't want to see them. Not fully. I noticed Chloe going quiet. I noticed Victor's visits getting shorter. I noticed Faye steering conversations away from anything that had to do with money or the house. I filed all of it under adult life, and people get busy because those explanations were easier to carry than the alternative. That's the first thing I tell anyone who asks. The truth usually announces itself quietly before it gets loud. We choose not to hear it because hearing it would require us to act, and acting is hard. And changing what we believe about people we love is one of the hardest things there is, but the cost of not hearing it. I know that cost now in a very specific number of dollars, and in something harder to count, which is the 2 years my granddaughter spent holding a secret alone because no one gave her reason to believe she'd be taken seriously. That part sits with me more than the money does. Chloe did something that most adults I know would struggle to do. She held on to what she knew was true, even when every person with authority over her life was telling her, directly or indirectly, that her version of events was wrong. She was 9 years old. She had been conditioned to distrust her own perception by people who needed her to be quiet. And she stayed quiet, until the moment she calculated that speaking might actually matter. Then she spoke. That's not a small thing. That's a form of intelligence that doesn't show up on any test. It's the ability to weigh a situation, read a person, choose your moment, Victor and Faye bet that she was too young to understand what she'd heard, too easy to dismiss, too afraid to speak. They were right about the fear. They were completely wrong about everything else. What I keep thinking is this: the choices Victor and Faye made didn't just cost them their freedom. They cost them their daughter's trust, probably permanently. They turned their own child into a witness against them by creating the kind of household where a 9-year-old learns to watch and calculate and wait because open honesty had already proven unsafe. You raise children inside whatever truth you're living. They absorb it. They learn the shape of it long before they have words for it. And sometimes, if they're brave, and if they find one adult willing to simply believe them, they use what they learn to stop something that should never have started. I believed Chloe because she told me the truth in the way people tell the truth, imperfectly, carefully, with a notebook she'd been keeping just in case. I believed her because her eyes had been trying to tell me something for 2 years, and I finally sat still long enough to hear it. Being believed is not a small thing either. I think it may have been the most important thing I've done in a long time. Not the attorney, not the investigators, not the credit report. Just sitting across a kitchen table from a child and saying, "I hear you. I believe you. That counts. She's going to be okay. I know that because of how she asked me about the leaves,